At 82 years old, Bob Dylan has finally broken a silence that lasted for decades. Whispers, stories, and speculation have swirled around his name since the 1960s. And now, in his twilight years, the man who once shrouded himself in riddles and metaphors has chosen to confess, to address the rumors that followed him like shadows on a long and winding road. But to understand the weight of such a revelation, we must first return to where it all began. He was born Robert Allen Zimmerman on May 24th, 1941, in Duluth, Minnesota. His parents, Abram Zimmerman and Beatrice Beatty Stone, came from a modest Jewish family with roots that trace back to Eastern Europe. His father worked as an appliance retailer, while his mother devoted herself to their home. In the small steel town atmosphere of Hibbing, Minnesota, where the family soon settled, young Robert grew up in a landscape of harsh winters, hard-working families, and a sense of resilience that would mark his later music. From an early age, Robert showed signs of restless energy. His teachers remembered him as quiet but determined. The radio became his greatest classroom. He soaked in every note of country, blues, gospel, and early rock and roll that he could find. He would sit for hours, twisting the dial until he caught the voices of Hank Williams, Little Richard, or Woody Guthrie. These voices were not just entertainment. They were revelations. In high school, Robert's passion for music began to eclipse everything else. He picked up a guitar, learned piano, and formed band with classmates. Their names, the Shadow Blasters, the Golden Chords, echoed the era of garage band enthusiasm. But beneath the covers of Elvis Presley songs, Robert was searching for something deeper, a sound that belonged to him alone. His childhood home provided stability, yet his imagination wandered far beyond Hibbing. He read voraciously, discovering literature that challenged and inspired him. From Jack Kerouac to Allen Ginsberg, he absorbed the restless energy of the Beat generation. In these books, Robert found voices that mirrored his own hunger for meaning, voices that rebelled against conventions of their time. After high school, he enrolled at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. But college life was never his destiny. The bustling folk music scene of Dinkytown, the student neighborhood near campus, proved irresistible. There, in smoky coffee houses, he began performing under a new name, Bob Dylan, inspired in part by the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. The moniker signaled reinvention. Robert Zimmerman, son of Hibbing, became Bob Dylan, the wandering troubadour who would soon carry America's conscience in song. By 1960, Dylan had already begun to chase the sound of freedom and defiance he heard in folk music. He studied every chord, every lyric, every performance of Woody Guthrie, his hero. Guthrie's ballads of workers and wanderers, sung from a hospital bed in New Jersey, felt like sacred scripture to Dylan. This devotion set him on a path from small-town Minnesota to New York City, where destiny awaited. Thus, the stage was set, a boy born of ordinary beginnings, armed with guitar, harmonica, and a restless heart, ready to take on the world. The road to fame was neither smooth nor certain for Bob Dylan. Arriving in New York City in January 1961, he carried little more than ambition and a weathered guitar. He haunted the clubs of Greenwich Village, performing in dimly lit rooms for sparse audiences. Yet even in those early days, people sensed something different. His raspy, raw voice, his haunting phrasing, and his piercing lyrics marked him as more than just another folk singer. It was during these nights in the village that Dylan visited his idol Woody Guthrie, who lay gravely ill in a hospital. For Dylan, it was like a pilgrimage. He sang for Guthrie, played his songs, and absorbed the last sparks of inspiration from the folk legend. This blessing of sorts deepened Dylan's resolve. In 1962, Dylan released his self-titled debut album, Bob Dylan, a collection of traditional folk songs and a few originals. It received little attention, selling only a few thousand copies. But the next year brought the freewheelin' Bob Dylan, an album that changed everything. With songs like Blow in the Wind and A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, Dylan's voice became the soundtrack of a generation confronting civil rights struggles, Cold War anxieties, and the looming shadow of nuclear destruction. His partnership with Columbia Records producer John Hammond, and later with manager Albert Grossman, ensured that his message reached far beyond coffeehouse stages. By the mid-1960s, Dylan was not just a musician, he was a phenomenon. His 1965 performance at the Newport Folk Festival, where he went electric with songs like a Rolling Stone, marked a turning point. The boos of folk purists echoed, but history sided with Dylan. He had reinvented what popular music could be. Throughout the decade, Dylan released a series of albums that remain cultural landmarks. Bringing it all back home, Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde. Collaborations with artists like the band Push Boundaries, blending folk, rock, and blues into something entirely new. Critics marveled, fans followed, and Dylan, enigmatic and aloof, refused to be pinned down. Yet fame carried burdens. By 1966, exhausted from touring and the pressures of constant reinvention, Dylan retreated following a mysterious motorcycle accident. Some said it nearly killed him. Others suggested it was his excuse to step away from the glare. Regardless, his absence only fueled the myth. In the years that followed, Dylan continued to defy expectations. He dabbled in country with Nashville Skyline, turned introspective with Blood on the Tracks, and embraced religious themes in his late 1970s Christian period. Each reinvention confused some, delighted others, but always reminded the world of his refusal to be predictable. Even his detractors acknowledged his genius. Dylan's writing won him honors, from Grammy Awards to an Academy Award, and ultimately, in 2016, the Nobel Prize in Literature for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. The Nobel marked the ultimate recognition of what fans had long known. Dylan's words were not just lyrics, they were literature. But his career was not without storms. Legal disputes, criticisms of erratic performances, and accusations of abandoning causes once close to him all painted a complicated picture. And yet, through it all, Dylan endured. A voice of resistance, a poet of contradictions, and an artist forever chasing reinvention. Behind the music and mythology, Bob Dylan lived a private, often turbulent personal life. Despite his fame, he guarded his privacy fiercely, leaving the world to piece together fragments of his story. His first significant romance came in the early 1960s with artist Susie Rotolo, immortalized on the cover of the freewheelin' Bob Dylan, where the couple walked arm in arm through a snowy New York street. Their relationship, marked by youthful passion and political fervor, ended in 1964, but Rotolo remained an enduring influence on Dylan's early songwriting. In 1965, Dylan married Sarah Loans, a former model and secretary. Together, they built a family that included 4 children, Jesse, Anna, Samuel, and Jacob Dylan, who would later become the lead singer of the Wallflowers. Dylan also adopted Sarah's daughter from a previous marriage, Maria Loans. The family lived for a time in Woodstock, New York, attempting to shield themselves from the glare of Dylan's fame. But the marriage was fraught with tensions, magnified by Dylan's restless lifestyle and the demands of his career. By the mid-1970s, their relationship had unraveled, culminating in divorce in 1977. The pain of that separation bled into Dylan's music, most notably in the searing honesty of Blood on the Tracks, an album widely regarded as one of his masterpieces. Dylan's romantic life remained complex after Sarah. In 1986, he married his backup singer Carolyn Dennis. Together they had a daughter, Desiree Gabrielle Dennis Dylan, born in 1986. For years, this marriage remained a secret from the public, only revealed in 2001. The union ended in divorce in 1992, marking another private heartbreak. Beyond these marriages, Dylan was linked to several women throughout his life, often inspiring speculation and stories. Figures like Joan Baez, with whom he shared both a romance and profound musical partnership, left indelible marks on his personal and professional journey. Their duets during the civil rights era symbolized hope and resistance, even as their relationship faltered. Despite the gossip, Dylan rarely spoke of his personal life. He remained enigmatic, letting his songs speak where interviews fell silent. His children, too, largely avoided the limelight, though Jacob's success with the Wallflowers offered a glimpse of Dylan's legacy passing to the next generation. In friendships, Dylan was equally complex. His bond with poets like Allen Ginsberg, his camaraderie with George Harrison and the Traveling Wilburys, and his wary alliances with contemporaries like Neil Young reflected a man both deeply connected and fiercely independent. The contradictions of his personal life mirrored the contradictions in his art. Intimacy alongside distance, passion alongside retreat, confession alongside silence. For decades, fans and biographers speculated about the deeper truths Dylan withheld. What did he feel about love, about loss, about the way to fame? For most of his life, Dylan remained a riddle. But at 82, that riddle began to unravel. Now, for the first time, Bob Dylan chose to speak. At 82 years old, in rare interviews and reflective writings, he addressed the rumors that had clung to him since his earliest days in Greenwich Village. The speculation was endless. Some claimed Dylan had fabricated his past, his childhood, his influences, even his very name. Others whispered of hidden affairs, of secret religious conversions, of a man living multiple lives. But above all, there was one enduring question. Who was Bob Dylan really? For decades, Dylan deflected such questions with wit, sarcasm, or silence. He built walls of metaphor around himself, cloaking truth in allegory. But as he aged, his perspective shifted. You spend so much time running from yourself, he reflected, that one day you look in the mirror and realize you were the only person you couldn't outrun. And so Dylan confessed. Yes, he admitted, the reinvention of Robert Zimmerman into Bob Dylan was not just an artistic decision. It was an escape. He had been embarrassed by his roots, by the ordinariness of small-town Hibbing. The myth of the wandering folk singer, the man with no past and only a guitar, was his creation. He acknowledged fabricating details of his early life to fit the image he wanted to project. More poignantly, Dylan spoke of the burden of carrying this persona. The world expected Bob Dylan, prophet and poet, when in truth he often felt like Robert Zimmerman, a man longing for privacy and normalcy. I was trapped in something I made, he admitted. The rumors of hidden romances and children, too, he touched upon. While he denied some wild exaggerations, he acknowledged the pain his secrecy had caused. His confessions were not salacious. They were reflective, tinged with regret. And then, perhaps most surprising, Dylan addressed the decades-long whispers about his faith. His conversion to Christianity in the late 1970s had baffled fans. Later, sightings of him at Jewish services added fuel to speculation. Finally, Dylan revealed the truth. His spiritual journey had been less about abandoning one tradition for another and more about searching for meaning in every corner of belief. I wasn't changing gods, he said softly. I was looking for the same one in different places. These confessions, spoken in a quiet cadence of old age, carry weight not because they were scandalous, but because they were human. They revealed a man stripped of myth, a man tired of performance. After decades of being America's reluctant prophet, Dylan seemed ready to embrace the simplicity of truth. And in doing so, he gave the world something unexpected, not another cryptic lyric or elusive poem, but himself. In his later years, Bob Dylan remained as active as ever, continuing his so-called never-ending tour, performing hundreds of concerts worldwide even into his 70s. His voice, gravelly and scarred by time, only deepened the intensity of his performances. Fans flocked to see him, not expecting the clarity of his youth, but the raw presence of a legend still creating in real time. Beyond the stage, Dylan continued recording. Albums like Time Out of Mind, Modern Times, and Rough and Rowdy Ways proved that his creativity had not dimmed. Critics marveled that, even in old age, Dylan could produce work of profound depth, grappling with mortality, history, and the American spirit. His Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016 cemented his place not just as a musician, but as one of the greatest poets of the modern age. Though characteristically reluctant to embrace the honor publicly, Dylan eventually accepted, delivering a lecture that revealed the literary giants who had shaped him. Homer, Melville, Hemingway. It was a final acknowledgement of his place within a tradition he had once merely emulated. By his 80s, Dylan had withdrawn further from the public gaze. His confessions, made in private interviews and memoir-like reflections, offered rare glimpses into man behind the myth. For fans, these revelations were both shocking and comforting. They did not diminish his stature. Rather, they made him more real, more relatable. As of 2023, Dylan remained alive, though increasingly reclusive. His performances slowed, his public appearances rarer still. But the confession he had offered at 82 ensured that his story was no longer just one of myth and mystery. It was also one of honesty. When Dylan does leave this world, as all must, his legacy will be immense. He reshaped popular music, transforming it into a vessel for poetry, protest, and personal revelation. He inspired countless artists, from the Beatles to Bruce Springsteen, from Patti Smith to U2. His songs became anthems for civil rights, anti-war movements, and generations seeking meaning. Yet beyond the accolades and influence, Dylan's greatest legacy may be his insistence on reinvention. He refused to be defined by anyone, not fans, not critics, not even his own past. And in his final confession, he revealed the humanity behind that stubborn independence. Bob Dylan's life reminds us that legends are rarely what they seem. Behind every myth lies a person flawed, searching, and endlessly complex. His confession at 82 was not an ending, but a final chorus, echoing the themes of his songs. Truth, illusion, love, loss, and the restless search for meaning. And so, as we close the story of Bob Dylan, we are left with this. A man who carried America's conscience in song, who outran and embraced his own identity, and who finally, after decades, gave us not just music, but himself.